Good evening, everybody.
Good evening,
Good to
Ken.
see everyone. I want to welcome everyone to episode 548, Blessing of Thankfulness and the Curse of Ingratitude. Tonight we have Wayne and Michael, and as always, Dr. Ricks. If you would start us out, that would be great.
As a veteran, 11, 11, 11, I want to, since this was Veterans Week, have a few veteran groaners in here. The first one is, um, why wouldn't a bunch of dogs want to go with their owners to the big Veterans Day parade? There were too many vets. Okay, how smart is your dog? Is your dog smarter than you? So, um, a, a guy develops, a psychologist develops this tape to tell the Army, if you can tell if your Army dog is smarter than the handler, and that, and it only costs $29.99. Well, here's how you can tell. If you pay $30 for this video, your dog is smarter than you. I know it's minus a penny, $30, but anyway.
Streaming.
Okay, I want to go in with one Thanksgiving groaner just for a second. One Thanksgiving groaner just for a second. If, because next week we're going to have a bunch of Thanksgiving jokes because we'll be getting ready for Thanksgiving. Okay. How did the turkey get across the lake? How did the turkey get across the lake? He rode in a gravy boat. Now this is my piece de resistance. This is a special joke for the day. A drill sergeant was just chewing out a new recruit, really giving him a real hard time, extra bad. And as he walked away, he turned around and said to the recruit, he said, "I'll bet you're going to dance on my grave when I die." And the recruit said, "No, Sergeant, I'm not going to dance on your grave, because I made a promise to myself that when I got out of the Army, I would never, ever stand in a long line again." I feel a few TAC officers that actual joke might apply to. They were mean. Okay, pod prep. The blessing of thankfulness and the curse of ingratitude as we think about Thanksgiving 2024. Wouldn't you agree that America has a lot to be thankful for?
Yes.
Yes. Go ahead, Michael.
I would say we absolutely do. It's easy to focus on a lot of the negative things because freedom is often used as a cloak for evil, if you will, and yet it's freedom is still necessary. It's still valuable, and for as much as goes unpunished or as goes by that we would not like to see, the many things that go on in society that seem to be unchecked, it still gives us the opportunity to do this. It still allows for the free worship of God and for the exercise of your conscience in the personal sphere, for a great deal of prosperity and kindness and neighborliness. Like, these things still exist. They're a little battered and they're bruised and they're beaten down at times, but it is still out there, and I'm still very, very thankful for what we have and for where we are, and I'm sure all of you are as well. Like, it's still a great and a wonderful place, and there's no reason we should give up on it, just yet. Not just yet.
All the immigrants that are coming in the southern border and the northern border as well. Why would they want to come here if it still wasn't the best place to be?
Mm-hmm. And I believe a lot of them aren't just coming. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, just talk about what a lot of people go through. It's easy, they come here and it sounds simple, but it's not. I mean, you're talking about people sometimes walking thousands of miles and the kind of peril that they expose themselves to, or, the amount of money that they spend to turn themselves over to criminals and what may happen to, your family along the way. Like this is a huge undertaking that people take to get here, not because it's evil and racist and exclusive or anything like that, because they believe that we have law and order and that we have prosperity and we have the opportunity to work for a living and to provide and to make something of yourself. And that's, it's still here. We still have it.
And I think a lot of them come because of the freedom. We have a lot. I think it's the freedom here. Yeah, her trial is on now. Lincoln Riley's trial about the immigrant that murdered her. There are a lot of bad ones.
You know that she fought for 18 minutes trying to save her life.
No, the criminals are bad among the aliens that are trying to get here, and I hope that Trump can get rid of a lot of them right away. But that's the scary part. I do think God worked it out where the election ensures you're going to have freedom of speech for a while. But getting rid of all the troublemakers is, they're going to, the lawyers are going to make that very difficult. And if they don't make it difficult, I'm going to be surprised, aren't you?
I guess we're going to be paying the lawyers to defend the immigrants, aren't we?
Oh, yeah. The kind of judges we have, I can just hear, you can't make this person go. And well, anyway, it's going to be messy, but I hope they can do it. And actually, for whatever it's worth, I'm excited about the kind of people they pick for the cabinet. Now, they may have a hard time getting through the Senate. I'm sure and the media it'll be a big fight. But these are people that signal a real change. And change could be a really good thing. So it gives you a little bit of hope, a little bit of hope. But America is still, in spite of maybe a current recession, is still, I think, the best economy of any big nation in the world. I believe that's true. You look at Japan, China, Germany, France, England. America still has the best economy. And it will probably, based on the stock market, they're betting on the future. It's been going up. Like the first time Trump went, it will probably get better. Don't you think, Ken?
I would think so, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Because we will see, but it'll probably get better.
It almost has to.
Well,
or else.
Or else.
Sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
I realize
Stock market's a scary thing.
Something bad could happen. We could have a worldwide recession. I mean, there are a lot of all kinds, but absent any shocking event, things in America look like they could get better. Could get better, and and I still think, and Thanksgiving is a day to thank our Creator for the blessings that we do have, and we should. I'm going to use one example, David, a man after God's own heart. But it says that in the Old and New Testament. He was a man after God's own heart. Ken, would you read the first scripture, 1 Chronicles?
To thank the Lord. Sure, I get a coughing fit now. To thank the Lord, give thanks to the Lord, call upon his name, sing psalms to him, talk of all his wondrous works, remember his marvelous works which he has done.
By the way, when you read this section of 1 Chronicles, it's called the Psalm of Thanks to God. And it's at the end of several things that are very interesting. One of those things has to do with him bringing, that's King David, bringing the Ark of the Covenant to Israel, to the people. And the reason why that is a significant thing is the Ark of the Covenant was It was kind of like a way of being in God's physical presence. That it represented his throne seat. I realize most of the time God wasn't there, but it's still a figurative sense. And what's interesting, when you go back to chapter 13, where it starts the description of what David went through to bring the ark, it was in somebody's barn, probably out in the boonies somewhere, locked away. It says nobody even thought about the Ark of the Covenant through the entire 40-year dynasty of Saul. Interesting. And you got to ask yourself, well, it didn't say anything was wrong. Saul wasn't commanded to do it or anything. But it's interesting that Saul never even thought about it. And it seemed like nobody thought about it until David did. Because he was so thankful and wanted to praise God. And he said, well, how can we, in a figurative sense, be in the presence of God and praise him if the ark is out in the boonies in somebody's barn locked away?
It is an interesting switch, and with all the war and stuff that was going on there, because when Samuel was very young, and it was the time of Eli was the high priest and his sons, and they were at war, and the people, they called for the ark to go out before them, and then you have, like you said, you have this period that follows that immediately where it's really not mentioned, like it's not a factor anymore, and yet right before that they wanted it, they asked for it to be out there, and you wonder how much of that has to do with the decay of the priesthood, I guess, during that time. Maybe that's a factor as well.
Oh, also in that very section, David begins reorganizing and improving the priesthood. He doesn't insert himself as high priest. He just puts in courses and choirs and singing and worship stuff. He puts a focus on thanking God. So if you're going to ask yourself, why was David a man after God's own heart? Because he thanked and praised God with music in his heart.
True. He was also very repentant when he did mess up as well. He was thankful for God being forgiving.
I always said this. I think when David repented, God loved him even more than he did before.
Good point.
Ken, would you read Psalms 8?
When I consider the heavens, the work of my fingers, the moon and the stars which thou work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars which thou hast ordained, what is man that thou art mindful of him, and the son of man, and has crowned him with glory and honor? Thou madest him to have dominion.
There's more to that whole section, but the interesting thing is, I can imagine this in my mind. David maybe being 17 or 16, guarding the sheep at night in Bethlehem, and the pasture is dark, and he's laying on his back looking up. They would not have had light pollution. This fabulous night sky with stars all over it, with his lyre, composing music and poetry to God, praising God, and God saw that. And God said, even though he was very young, God said, there is a man after my own heart. I mean, isn't that a great thing to think of? Okay, but I just think that's why God was so blessed David so much, because David was so thankful. Um, anyway, I think it's a spirit of appreciation that David showed.
David was also very protective. Like, he didn't walk when he slayed Goliath. He ran to slay Goliath. He called him an uncircumcised Philistine, I think it was. And he had a zeal for doing things for God.
That zeal is great. That zeal is really great.
And even when he was even when he was an outcast, even when he was fleeing for his life from Saul and all that, and the band of men that gathered around him, he was actively, working to protect Israel, to protect the people of God, even though he was essentially an outcast at that point in time. And, he had a band out there, and he was working with one of the kings of the Philistines, but he would go raid against different Philistines, when that king thought he was off pursuing Israel, or that he was avenging himself, or however it was. But he was actually protecting God's people at that point in time. There's nobody's forcing him to do that or forcing him to take those actions. You would think as essentially like a traveling warlord, if you will. He's mobile. He's got all these men. He's got everything he needs. He could probably go wherever he wants and do what he wanted. He never raised his hand against Saul, and he didn't set off on his own to set up his own kingdom or find out his own fame. He stayed there, and he protected God's people, and he waited for things to come about in the proper way, in the way that it was promised that it would.
Yeah. And I think there's a spiritual law, like a law of gravity. If you're thankful, you're happier. And if you're thankful, you're more likely to be blessed by God. And then the converse of that should be true. If you're unthankful and you're full of ingratitude, you're more likely to slip into spiritual decay and degradation. And I just think that's something that is true. Ken, would you read 2 Timothy 3, please?
But know this, that in the last days perilous times will come, for men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, and without self-control, and brutal.
I've wondered, because you could also translate dangerous times, and I've wondered, probably many people who are Christians have said that more than once. I think we're in the end times. Look at how bad people are. But I wonder, I don't think we're quite there yet, but we're a lot closer than we used to be.
There's a lot of open acceptance of things that are explicitly evil, and it's a big change, and it's certainly a progression into our time from these last, I don't know, 100 years of history, or however you will. We get this idea that, through the Victorian age and into the modern age, things were pretty buttoned up, and there's a strict morality, and that's the public image that's pretty well presented through that time frame. Obviously, the truth of the matter is that a lot of this kind of stuff went on behind the scenes or undercover. It just wasn't quite so open and accepted or celebrated, or many other things. They go way beyond the pale, and they go way beyond the pale publicly these days. But then if you consider history, and you consider a lot of what happened in Greece or in Rome in ancient times, I mean, people get all nuts about football and everything like that, but they're not going and they're renting their favorite players afterwards or anything like they were doing with the gladiators back in Rome. And, we don't have open slavery and all of the sins that entailed along with it. We don't have the kind of open relationships between old men and young boys that they did back in Greece. These are things that have ebbed and flowed throughout history. And so while we are repulsed by a lot of similarities that exist and are accepted in our time, you do have to have that perspective. We're looking for the worst time in history. And certainly as far as things have gone now, God willing, a little bit of what we've seen recently is a pushback against that. And I don't want to project that onto it, but that is my hope, and I'm sure that's all of our hope, that it just went too far and people are like, we're not ready for that. It's wrong. It's too much. We have to put a lid on it as much as possible at this point in time. Things can ebb, they can flow, they can change. Doesn't mean everything's fixed, but it doesn't mean everything's irrevocably lost either. And draw close to God while we still can, and be thankful for what we have and can be thankful for still. Like kitties. Keyboard dwellers.
But it's certainly true. I think a lot of people were repulsed by men being able to go to the women's locker room because they declared themselves the separate gender. And wouldn't you agree that that's the election would tend to say a lot of people did not go along with that?
The election said that a lot of people were not pleased with a lot of different things. And hopefully, the present administration has a mandate to get through the policies that the people really want. We'll see.
Yeah. He does seem to
And
be
they only have
putting.
a few votes.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dr. Ricks.
They only have a few votes to spare in the Senate and the House, so it's going to be
Yeah.
tight. And you know the media is going to be beating up on them, but I'm hoping they can do it.
Yeah, it would be nice. Would be nice.
At least the crazies aren't in charge. I looked at some of the pictures of some high bureaucrats. I won't mention any names, but there's an admiral that comes to mind, and some others. I thought, wow.
Dudes in dresses seem to be a theme in this administration.
And I think that person that's in charge, and I see this one guy that's in charge of transportation. I just start laughing. I don't know why. It just cracks me up.
Could be his name.
Yes. And you just know it's all politics. There's no way he knows what he's doing. I don't know. Maybe anyway. That's how it appears. And so the more you're unthankful, the more evil influences you drink in. Ken, would you like to read Romans 1 for us, please?
Sure. Because although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened.
And that word futile, it's like when people think they're so smart and they're not thankful to God for what they have. And well, we did it because we're so wise and so smart or so academic or whatever or so woke. And God says it's futile.
Well, the people who came here on the Mayflower in 1620, half of them died the first year. And they had a socialist form of government at the beginning. And a lot of them didn't want to work. And they weren't in the new world cooperating like they should have been. And therefore they didn't survive. At least half of them didn't.
Yeah. You know what's bizarre about that whole socialist experiment thing? That wasn't added to the Pilgrims until the last minute. At the last minute, that group of people that were backing them said you have to do it this way, which was this whole socialist or I'm trying to think of the right word, but they wanted it to be this whole sharing everything, and it was a last minute change to the Pilgrims. And then what's his name? If he wouldn't have changed it, they'd have been dead. He finally said, this ain't working. All right, everybody gets a chunk of land. You guys work it, do what you can. All of a sudden, boom, they were successful. It was like the first, the next season when everything, after everything changed, they had food, they had everything. And that's how the Thanksgiving came along. The real Thanksgiving came around was because we had, or our ancestors had, an abundance, and they shared it with the Indians who needed help. It wasn't the other way around.
Yeah, remember Squanto?
Yep.
Squanto was the Indian that spoke better English than most of the Pilgrims.
Yeah, it was all a miracle. I think we talked about it last week to an extent.
And think about what a blessing Squanto was. My understanding, Squanto was a young man, about 14 and 15, was in that area, maybe that very same village that they were in, he came from. And some fishing boat captured him and took him to England and other young Indians as slaves to work in England. And he got in England, and of course he learned the King James English, being in London, And it's a long story, but Christians bought him out of slavery. And it's a longer story, but then he booked himself on another fishing boat that came to the same area, and he jumped ship. And all of a sudden, the Pilgrims had just been there, and here comes walking in their village not only a fellow Christian, but probably the one of only two men, if only one man. We're not sure if there was a second guy that halfway understood it. The only man on the whole planet who could speak the King James English and I think it's anyway, it's the word that Massachusetts came from. That's a group of tribes, and it's their language. And I'm probably going to mispronounce the name like I always do, but he could speak their language perfectly. So they had a translator that could communicate with the local tribe in a language they understood. Now think about that. The only guy on the whole planet, probably, there may have been a second guy that halfway learned some English, but probably the only guy on the whole planet who could speak both languages very well, and he shows up in your camp. What a blessing that was to the Pilgrims.
That was providence, was it not?
Mm-hmm.
That was God blessing them. And they were thankful when they got there. They prayed and thanked God for getting them there. So it's Governor Bradford. He's the one that put them on the capitalist thing. And once they were successful, they sent word back to the other Puritans, hey, this country's got great forests and we're making out. And they poured across the ocean, and the rest is history.
Yep.
I mean, oversimplified, but the rest is history. So from that, we conclude that you must be appreciative of God's blessing this Thanksgiving, because it's good for it. And I would argue that it was a blessing to everybody who was thankful. The two examples I put in the text here were George Washington encouraged Thanksgiving because of the stress, all the stuff, America, Revolution, and the Articles of Confederation, and all those problems. And Abraham Lincoln made it an official because of the stress of the Civil War. And whatever you might say about it, I think it was 1863 when it would become an official holiday. The government did win the war, so God did bless him, didn't they?
Yep.
And that was a tough war to win. I mean, it's amazing how much better the Confederate generals and their army, they could move twice as fast as the Union Army. I know all armies have problems and personality problems, but the Union Army had a lot of squabbling with generals. Anyway, we could tell you some stories where Grant had to go to the front lines and rough up, and verbally speaking, some generals to get them to move. They would do. Anyway, we're getting off the subject. My point is, America, in times of stress, called on God, and it worked.
We survived a horrific war, a civil war. Hopefully we will never have to go through that again.
Yeah, very much so. And by the way, the last act Lincoln signed was to put in God We Trust on our coinage in March 1865. Now, if he hadn't been assassinated, he would have signed more, but that's the last one he signed. It's kind of interesting, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And the Apostle Paul also emphasized thankfulness, because it is a big deal, right?
Mm.
If you want to be spiritually mature, you have to also be thankful. Let's go to Ephesians 5:18, please, Ken.
And I've been very thankful the last couple weeks. All right. And do not be drunk.
By the way, has anybody noticed that gasoline prices actually went down? I was predicting after the election they would go up, but they went down, which kind of is amazing.
Yeah. And do not be drunk with
just-
wine, but be filled with the Spirit, speaking to one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody in your heart to the Lord, giving thanks always for all things to God.
And like if music is a major force, then thankfulness and music together is a even stronger major force.
Sure.
It is an emotional thing. I mean, it's something that you do when you're happy or when you're sad. You know, music encompasses many of the extremes, I guess, of emotion, and certainly you see that in the Psalms and many of the things that David wrote. You know, you get both sides. You get both sides of the spectrum of just rejoicing and then of repentance, of course, and of, you know, his lower moments, if you will. But yeah, I mean, being thankful, being appreciative, it's I don't know, it's like almost the other side of being vain or being greedy or selfish of all that. Thankfulness is almost like a direct opposite. When you're being thankful, when you're acknowledging someone or something else, or God for everything that He has provided, you know, you're acknowledging that it didn't come from you. You know, you didn't do it. You know, when you're being thankful, you're placing that elsewhere, and elsewhere is usually where everything that we can. I guess we should always do our best, and, you know, our best endeavors, our best efforts, and all of those things. But it's never, you know, it's never a one man show. It takes multiple people. It takes a spouse. It takes a church. It takes friends and leaders and all of these things. And it takes you know, it takes leadership in your country. And more than that, it takes God Almighty, you know, to buoy up your efforts and to make things succeed. We should be thankful.
Well, remember,
we still can.
remember that God puts in the kings and takes down the kings as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's the ultimate decider of any election or anything, especially here in the United States.
And sometimes that's an encouraging statement, and sometimes it's not.
Sometimes it isn't.
I'm very thankful, though, that gasoline is less than 20 cents a gallon, you know.
Yeah.
Pre-1964 dimes are worth over $2. So 2 dimes, 20 cents is over $4.
Wow.
So going back to the old days and some of the old ways and the coinage that says "In God We Trust," you know, it's easy to buy a gallon of gasoline for less than a quarter. A quarter is like $5 now.
Now, precious metals are definitely a hedge against inflation.
Yeah, these are. Actually, my theory was if the Dems had won, gas prices would start streaking back up. They're artificially pushing them down artificially to get through the election. But since Trump won so convincingly, maybe the oil industry is thinking, well, you know, it's 60 more days and it's pump baby pump or drill baby drill, whatever the deal is.
Typically, the oil industry, the price of oil changes on supply and demand. And supply may be up or down. I don't know right now, but I'm pretty sure demand is down. This time of year, demand goes way down. So as demand drops, the price drops. So, and I know I'm pretty sure across the country, demand has been down. So gallons are not moving as much as they were versus maybe a couple years ago.
And we are in a
Also,
recession.
We don't own the entire oil game in the world. You know, we don't even control most of it necessarily. I mean, I know Venezuela's off limits and Iran is out of bounds, but then you start looking at OPEC and Saudi Arabia and some of these other Gulf countries, what Russia has in store, and all of that kind of factors into the overall price. You know, if OPEC thinks that the United States is about to get deregulated and opened up, what do they want to do? They don't want to keep the price high. They want to keep the price high so that they can make more money when we're not producing any oil. If we're going to suddenly, open the floodgates, then they're going to start producing more oil so that our companies don't make as much money, so they can't put it back into exploration and production and those sorts of things. And they can turn it on and off with the flick of a switch. It's not like here. It's not like red tape and nonsense and all that. They're just capping it or they're opening it up. Like it's established.
Mhm.
It's long standing, and it is a competition game for them. And at a certain point, they can price, America out of the market. I don't know, shale changed everything, but, regulation and the price of labor and all of that plays into it as well. And so it's not like we don't have any competition or we're the only people that are going to make a difference as to what the price is. And the price at the pump doesn't necessarily reflect the price per barrel. When you think that we're paying, what's it, 70 or something right now, it's around 70. And it's been around 70, and even we were paying like mid twos plus, and that's here in Texas where we have a whole bunch of the juice in the ground. There's more to it than that, and our refining costs are through the roof, and all that sort of stuff as well.
We have more regulations on refining. I guess we refine cleaner. So they actually using American oil is better for the environment than keeping it in the ground, but nobody seems to realize that among the green crowd. But if they can get down our oil regulations on our industries like oil, who knows? The price could really go down in a year or two.
I will
But I
point
guess
out.
we'll see.
I will point out that our friend in Canada is not as gleeful about the price of gas as we are.
That's because he pays by the liter. I'm so sorry.
Speaking of oil in the ground, though, where is the strategic oil reserve right now?
Oh, it's
as far as
worse as ever.
percent?
It's terribly low right now.
That's what I
Did they
figured.
start? Did they
Yeah,
start replenishing it after the big? No, not at all.
I think they
Okay.
used it to help them win the election. I mean, it almost helped them win the election.
Not this one. Must have been the midterms.
Keep it low. They used our own oil reserves to bring down the price. And I see it's all you care is about appearance is not the real thing. It was a clever thing to do. By the way, when it comes to being thankful, you can also, God even likes people that are thankful for everything, even trials. Because think of how impressed God is someone if they're thankful for a trial, realizing that God loves them so much that he's going to give them a trial to make them even better. That's real maturity. Not that I want to experience it, but
That's also against carnal human nature, is it not? I mean, nobody in their right mind would like a trial thinking carnally, thinking like a normal person. But it does lead to a lot of good things ultimately, if you can endure it and overcome it.
And I think the more thankful you are, the closer you draw to God. The more unthankful and lack of gratitude, it pulls you away from God, like a magnet, positive, negative. So the more we can be thankful, even in hard times. But we have to resist the woke movement. And let me give you what I think, the woke movement, at least their scholars discredit Thanksgiving. And they've been doing it for years. And the Thanksgiving holiday with the Wampanoag people and the colonialists was good for both parties because obviously, by the way, did you know that England led the Industrial Revolution because they had better agricultural techniques? They were able to raise enough food for the English people and still have about 20% of their workforce that could work in cities and factories. And that's why England, and maybe God's blessing too, but why England led the Industrial Revolution, even before France and Germany and some other countries. And so and this goes back to the 1600s when it started. So the Pilgrims would know at least some of that, so they could share all that or some of that at least, technology with the Indians. And of course, the Indians knew a lot of local things about where to fish, all the local stuff. So they could help each other. And the way it's told, the poor Indians were being bamboozled. Also, did you know the Indians were being protected in part by the Pilgrims? There's a book that I have called 1491. And the author of the book goes through all the different indigenous groups, the Aztecs and the Incas, a whole bunch of them, Caribbean. And there's a similar pattern. The internecine warfare among indigenous groups really weakened them and allowed the conquistadors and the others to conquer them. I'm oversimplifying, but that's pretty much, you read the book, he gives you a lot of gruesome details. You think you know bad, the Aztecs were brutal. You have no idea. Some people say some of the new Mexican cartel gangs are bringing back Aztec brutality. Just anyway, some of their dark occult stuff. But if that's true or not, but they were really brutal. Well, the same thing was true of the Pilgrims. When their scouts watched the Pilgrims unload, they noticed that they had guns. I think they had one cannon. And they were under pressure from the Iroquois League, which was to their west, their enemies that were trying to wipe them out. And so the Pilgrims made a good ally. As more Pilgrims came with more guns, well, you see the picture. They needed the Pilgrims. And of course, it was good for everybody. And for 50 years, they lived in peace together, which I didn't, well, until I read certain material, I never knew that. That many years they were in peace together. But anyway, see, none of that fits what the academia has been saying about Thanksgiving. That all these colonists were cruel and evil, and they were trying to genocide against the Indians. That actually is not true. I mean, some Indian tribes were trying to wipe out other Indian tribes. I'm not saying there was, some of that went on, but if you look at I've seen a big map of America with all the Indian reservations drawn out. There's some huge Indian reservations. Is it South Dakota, North Dakota? Over half the land is Indian reservation. And they're in Massachusetts. Almost every state has big ones. And the Indians are, at least some Indians, I know it's a complicated world, big country, but some Indians, like the ones in Florida, have a really good deal. They get all the rights of American citizenship, plus they have special rights and tax-free stuff inside the reservation, so they get to run businesses without paying state and federal taxes. See, they get a lot of breaks. And the Indian population, everybody thinks it's decimated. Their numbers are a lot, their numbers have increased like everybody else's numbers. Does that make sense? What I'm saying, what the academics say about is genocide on the Indians is not true.
Well,
that's probably more than most people want to hear about it, right?
Who's the author of lies and falsehoods and causing people to do things that they really don't want to do?
That's so true.
And it's certainly, I mean, there's a long and a complicated history there. I mean, you talked about some of the brutality of the Aztecs and some of the other customs that were in place, would have been abhorrent to 16th, 17th, 18th century Europeans. It would have struck them like something out of another world. And so you can see some incompatibility there, and also in lifestyle. Not all of them. When you as we pushed westward, and Europeans have a tendency to settle and build fences and farm and do all this stuff, right? And the native peoples, they tend to roam around seasonally to follow the food, to go wherever there was a seasonal source of food or whatever. So you cycle out, this area that you always go through, and you come back, and lo and behold, there's a ranch there or something like that. These are two different lifestyles now. And now instead of, the place where you go forage or hunt deer, whatever it may be, where the buffalo roam, if you will, instead there's a big ranch there. You have an inherent conflict in that, and the idea that they would stand and fight, or that there would be conflict and then it would escalate. It's fairly predictable, as you have two cultures that don't mesh perfectly. Not that there isn't or wasn't a lot of meshing, and I feel like a lot of those success stories are sort of whitewashed over, if you will, where there was adaptation, or the natives took up all of European customs and benefited from them, from farming techniques and from the lifestyle. And I mean, when you look at what you're offering in terms of science and medicine and shelter and just the basic comfort and necessities of life, a lot of people were simply absorbed into that system and then consequently forgotten, because it's not a long, broken, sad tale or anything like that. So we have a tendency to just pass over a lot of those successes, maybe. But one thing that I would say, there is sad stuff in Native communities that still exist. There's a lot of broken folks. There's a lot of trouble with drugs and alcoholism and things like that. But in as much as guilt has led to reservations and other forms of entitlement, or the tribe functions as a body and they all take care of their own, and so on and so forth. And so people even get monthly stipends and payments, and so then you're essentially receiving welfare of a sort. You're receiving money that you didn't work for, and that has a negative impact on your personal character when you just have this disposable money coming in every month and you just burn it into the ground. And there's terrible alcoholism and other forms of abuse and things like that in Native communities. To this day, it's an ongoing problem, and maybe entitlement has something to do with that, but entitlement can have a bad effect on any society.
We took a trip out west to the West Coast, and when the kids were real little, we had a car trouble, and I think we were in Oklahoma, but I could be wrong, somewhere out west. It was near an Indian reservation, and the guy who ran the mechanic shop, fixed the car, was a Native American, and we were, I like to chat with people, so we were chatting, and of course he was doing well, had his own business, doing well, and he said the obvious thing. He said, well, the Native Americans who get off the reservation like him and get a job and, get out in society, when a lot do, of course, never have for many years, they do very well. He said, those that stay on the reservation and get free food or whatever, and he says it's sort of, and then I said, is it sort of like the inner city with a lot of, well, I was referring to my people, but you could apply to some others as well. If you're in the inner city and you get caught in what's called a welfare trap, it undermines values and character, and it's like it sucks you down. And we both said, yeah, it's true. It's the same thing. Well, maybe differences, but not many. And the interesting thing is there are a lot of great Indian leaders like Chief Joseph. I had a big portrait of him over my office. He was one of the big peacemakers, I think, of the Lakota tribe out in the Dakotas somewhere back in the old days. And by the way, in every Indian war, we're going to all the different ones America had, there were indigenous nations on both sides. In other words, our government had Indian nations around their side, and some were much more advanced than others, like the Cherokee, the most advanced. And oddly, not that it's a big deal, but my grandmother was part Cherokee, and you could look at her, she had the cheeks to show for it. But there are a lot of that around. There are a lot of Indian blood in the American public. We just don't know it. So when people say, well, the Indians are gone, I meant the Native Americans. I keep getting that mixed up. It's an old age thing.
I think we're way past that at this point, Dr. Ricks.
Yeah, they're upset. The point I'm getting at is a lot of Native American blood is out there in the general public. We just don't hear about it. Right?
Where I'm from, up in East Tennessee, it was illegal to marry a Native American woman. it was forbidden by law, but
Oh, I didn't know that.
stop it. That's what I was told. I have a great grandmother that was Cherokee as well.
Interesting.
You guys are cousins.
Hey guys,
We're brothers.
about the eighth reunion. Anyway, but yeah, there's a lot of that went on, and I think academia has corrupted a lot of things. I'm not saying that the history of America and wars with Native American nations aren't complicated, and each one has its own story. But we don't need to get off on that too much. My only point is they make people hate Thanksgiving when they shouldn't. And because a lot of people from Native North American, let's say, indigenous background are storming the border to get into America. They don't think being in America is a bad idea. They're walking across deserts and everything to get in here.
Yeah, no kidding. You know, the stuff they used to tell us about the Pilgrims and Thanksgiving when I was a kid, like that the Indians saved them, and that's not true. They showed them, Indians told them how to plant corn. They had corn in England. They had corn in Europe. They just showed them how to deal with the soil they were using because it was not as rich where they were at. For some reason, they had to drop a fish in with every kernel of corn for a better
Nitrogen.
yeah. So, but I mean, they acted like they taught you in school that the Pilgrims were stupid and the Indians bailed them out of everything. And it was not the case. I mean, it was complete. And in fact, Indians didn't have tools to use to do their farming. They used the tools they used the implements from the Pilgrims they let them use them because they didn't have any. So, I mean, it was completely the opposite of what they've told us our whole life, which is not surprising. Many things are completely the opposite of stuff they told us our whole life.
And if you look at the people in New England, those early Pilgrims were kind of rugged. I mean, you know, it was a big forest. All these things we have now, like roads and all the ports, they didn't have all that stuff. You think about living out in the wilderness. Those people were hardworking, clever, and strong. And I mean that not just physically, but mentally strong too.
They had to be. You know, the wilderness was Tennessee at one time.
Yeah. One time, Pittsburgh was the edge of the world. Well, almost. It was the wilderness. But, you know, that's all that stuff that now is far east that was considered wilderness. But in other words, the Pilgrims laid the foundation to the greatest nation in the world. And why did they do that? In part because their holiday was Thanksgiving, and God liked that. And that's why they were so successful. And American scholars are wrong about most things these days. They're wrong about the Pilgrims too, and Thanksgiving.
Yep. I just want to point out that it's like 5 of, and we got the ways.
We're way behind. I thought we had plenty of time. We're running our mouth. Ken, would you read Colossians 2:7, please?
Right. Rooted and built up in him and established in the faith as you have been taught, abounding in it with thanksgiving.
Okay. Can we go? Let's skip all the way to Colossians 2:6, please.
Wait, is that where I was just at? 2:6.
No.
All right, hold on.
You were 2.
Hold on, I'm getting there.
2:7.
Get
You were
the
2:7.
Psalms. There we go. All right. As ye have therefore received Christ Jesus the Lord, so walk ye in him, rooted and built up in him and established in the faith as ye have been taught, abounding therein with thanksgiving.
And if you have an unthankful population, it's an unhappy population. And to be happy and contented, you have to be thankful. I really believe that's true. We need to learn to be thankful. And if you're thankful, you're blessed. And here's something else academia is doing. They're teaching American young people to hate America in America. I'm not saying some foreign place is brainwashing our kids overseas. We have colleges where not only are they burning Israeli flag, they're burning American flags.
Well, you know, a lot of the people said that they would leave the United States if Trump was elected president. One young man, right?
No, no,
Don't let
no,
the
no.
One young man, though, said that I'm going to do it. I'm going to leave the United States. I'm moving to Hawaii.
Yeah, I've seen that. That was
They're so
hilarious.
well educated, aren't they?
Man, that's gonna be brutal.
That's a Kamala voter. That's a Kamala voter.
Yeah. Well, he want to really get away. He should go to some place like what's that island on the end of Florida? Oh, you're welcome. Way
Cuba?
Yeah.
Cuba.
What was that name again?
Dry Tortugas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Saint something, isn't it? I don't remember.
I used to know the name of it. All of a sudden now I can't think of it. That last island on the chain of Florida. But anyway, yeah, go down there to get away out of America. And 1 Thessalonians 5:18, please, Ken.
We're skipping Colossians. Here we go.
1 Thessalonians 5:18.
In everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus concerning you.
America is a very blessed nation, still is blessed, and we need to be thankful. I think, and if we are more thankful, we'll be more blessed. And right now, I hear rumors that Antifa on the West Coast tried a few things the day after the election, and the police stopped them. Like, what?
Our police?
I heard the police in Oregon and in Seattle stopped them. I guess they bottled them up, arrested a few, and broke it up. And I thought they would, tear down. Now, they still may be planning something big for January. But I thought Antifa would go crazy, but it seems as if God has blessed America. The election wasn't close enough to have anything to argue about. I think maybe God's blessed America that they're not going to burn down the place and cause such chaos, because that was a prediction. If Trump won, Antifa is going to take this country apart.
You're right. They were going to, but it was too big of a victory, like you said. They had planned if it was close, because actually Kamala admitted this when she gave her concession. That they had planned to have a different kind of speech that day. It was supposed to be to keep fighting. They're going to keep counting, this, that, and the other thing. And then, Antifa and all the other, goofballs were going to be out there causing trouble. But it was such a blowout. They were kind of stunned. I don't think they were ready for it. And they kind of got taken aback. Don't worry, they'll regroup. They'll regroup and they'll be at our throats before you know it.
Weren't you surprised he won every battleground state?
Every.
Yes, I was surprised.
Yeah.
But they're still counting votes in Pennsylvania.
Is in Arizona too? Is that right?
Probably. They're still counting votes, trying to get more Republicans or Democrats to win. They're going to keep voting them until the Democrats win. That's how they work. They're even voting illegal votes, and they're admitting they're voting illegal votes, and the Supreme Court told them they can't, in their state said they can't do it, and they're doing it anyway. What are you going to do? That's what we're just going to do it. We don't care. So these big ballot dumps keep coming in the trunk of cars and stuff. And
I want to bring up one more topic before we end tonight, and that is, did you know the people in London, a bunch of them celebrated Trump's victory? It was huge. Our media hasn't covered the story, so you haven't heard about it. but it's on YouTube if you go to the right place.
Yeah.
It's surprising. Huge rallies. And there are people speculating that the globalists in a lot of the Western countries are worried that this Trump thing could turn the tide on globalism and also open up more free speech. You know, in England, if there's a Muslim riot or something, you record it on your smartphone, you could be put in jail if you send that to somebody else.
Yeah.
Or if you say certain things online that the government, in other words, there's no free speech in England. Can you believe that?
Well, one woman was arrested for praying silently across the street from a women's clinic in England.
Yeah.
And all she was doing was praying silently
I think
on the side.
did she get sentenced to like 9 months or something? I seen a blip of something.
I think they let her go.
They did let her go. Somebody got 9 months.
I think ultimately they let her go, which was the right thing to do.
Well, the right thing to do is never even. It's just insane. It's insane.
Probably because she got some publicity somewhere. But the question is, can this election of Trump have a big international effect on populism and nationalism as opposed to globalism? And by the way, I'm not saying yes or no. I think there are powerful forces in the West that don't want Trump's influence to get over there. But as I say, it's influencing England, at least based on what I saw. You know, how that'll work out in the long run, I don't know.
It's going to influence Ukraine, Russia, Iran, Israel, several other countries as well.
Mm-hmm.
It has to.
Yeah. I imagine they're rethinking their strategies now.
If this cabinet he's picking, some pretty tough cookies in this cabinet, if this hits the ground running and they accomplish what they look like they're capable of accomplishing, it's going to change the world.
Yes.
If we managed, I don't know that it's possible to get, I don't know how much of the corruption you can get, but if you get it deep enough, I don't know that you'll ever uproot it. In fact, it'll probably, once you pull it, it'll probably grow back over time. But even if you get it beat back for 4 years, it'll change things everywhere. I mean, if corrupt people start getting locked up, people will start having second thoughts about counting ballot drops until the guy they want wins, if they know that so and so had to go to prison for 20 years. I mean, that's what people have to go to prison. They have to go. Big name, loudmouth people that they have to go to prison no matter what.
I can see it now. The media will scream Nazi.
I don't care. And Trump needs to not care, and nobody needs to care, and they just need to. Justice is all that should be, not retribution. It's justice. What the left has done was retribution or lawfare.
Lawfare.
But what Trump has the green light to do based on the election is justice. We want justice. The people that voted, they wanted cheap eggs and cheap gas, and they wanted interest rates down to 3%. But a huge chunk of them want justice. We're just so sick of the left pounding their insanity on us and just lying with, just lying just to breathe. They'll climb a tree to tell a lie rather than tell the truth standing on the ground. And we're sick of it. I mean, they're going after this Matt Gaetz guy. If you don't know anything behind this supposed underage girl, the website where this was supposedly took place admitted he never had an account, and there is no girl. There's no girl.
What?
You can't find a girl. There's no name. There's no girl.
I heard there was going to leak. Embarrassing things are going to be leaked by the Democrats about him. That's what I heard.
Good luck. There's no girl, and there's no account.
It was just the FBI trying to get him keep him to mess with him. Is that
right? And they're all, you know, all the left cares about. That's what they've been chiming in about. But the one woman who accused Biden had to move to Russia to stay alive. Now you tell me that I care what they say. I don't care what they say. The woman that accused Biden of putting his hand up her skirt had to move to Russia because she was in fear for her life. Because that's how way the Democrats work.
By the way, I think this hurts the media. Did you hear that CNN is laying off a bunch of people?
Yeah, and MSNBC is up for sale. You guys want to chip in a couple bucks and buy it?
Yeah.
You can put line upon line on MSNBC. Everybody can have their own show, man.
Credibility.
Probably wouldn't take much. I could clean up my ashtray.
Yeah. Well, I hope the alternative media can gain more momentum. I still think we can get a lot of these local stations to take these network shows off and let them, people have to go get them online like everything else. Don't give them the advantage they do have because they don't deserve it. But I guess we'll see. I hope they can also get that 230 where you can sue internet providers who do terrible things to your account. That's one of the things that they want to get. And that's going to be a battle because, you know, the vested interests, big pharma, big med, big tech, they're going to fight these reforms with every dollar they got. So it's going to be a battle. Well, at least I've enjoyed it.
And you aren't prepared at all.
I've enjoyed it today. And you all want to thank everybody for coming, Michael and Wayne and, of course, Ken.
All right. Well, I'd just like to say good night, everyone. Hope everyone enjoys the rest of your Sabbath, and we'll see you back here again next week.
Good night.
Good night.
We're happy you could make it. So glad you are here, and hope that we've been able to make God's word more clear. Until next time, may God be with you in everything you try. But for now, till next week, we have to say goodbye.